New York. Midsummer. Rain fell hard over 42nd Street, blurring the neon skyline into streaks of color that bled down the glass. The city pulsed, but inside the Velvet Room, time slowed to a crawl. Ruby Johnson sat alone at the bar, the rim of her third tequila glass tracing a perfect circle in the condensation. Her reflection wavered in the mirror-red dress, tired eyes, lips pressed into something between defiance and heartbreak. Her phone still glowed on the counter with a message that had ended 7 years of her life in 9 words. "I'm sorry. You deserve someone better." She wanted to laugh. Someone better, as if love were a resume. As if she hadn't built herself around a man who left the moment things got inconvenient. A familiar voice broke through her thoughts. "You need to do something reckless tonight," Saphir said, sliding into the seat beside her. "It's your 30th birthday. Babe, one night, no regrets." Ruby's laugh was low, unsteady. "And what do you suggest I do? Dance on the counter? Sing the blues?" "No." Sapphire's eyes glinted under the red lights. "You're going to kiss the first man who makes you forget your own name." Ruby almost said no, almost, but something in her chest had already cracked open. Outside, thunder rolled. Inside, her pulse matched its rhythm. Then she saw him. He sat at the far end of the bar, a man who looked entirely wrong for this place. White shirt damp from the rain, sleeves rolled to his elbows, tie loosened just enough to betray exhaustion. He was the kind of beautiful that didn't ask to be noticed, the kind that drew the world toward him anyway. His eyes lifted from his glass and caught hers gray. Unreadable. Too calm for the storm around them. Ruby froze. Something primal moved through her. Not attraction exactly, but recognition. Like she'd known this stranger in another life. Another rain. Another ending. Sapphire followed her gaze and grinned. "That one? Go. You're insane. And you're sober enough to regret not doing it." Ruby hesitated. Then she stood up, the hem of her red dress brushing against her knees. The air seemed to thicken with each step. When she stopped in front of him, he looked up slow, deliberate, as though time itself had obeyed him. "Can I help you?" he asked, voice low, rough-edged like it had carried too many secrets. Ruby didn't answer. Her hand trembled once, then steadied as she reached out, touched his cheek, and kissed him. The kiss was a spark in a storm, sudden, reckless, alive. He didn't pull away. He deepened it, one hand sliding behind her neck, the other still holding his glass, as if the world would shatter if he let go. Rain hammered against the windows, drumming like applause. When they broke apart, she was breathless. He looked at her like a man remembering something he'd sworn to forget. "What was that for?" he murmured. "For feeling something," she whispered back, just once. Neither of them said another word that night. Later, she remembered the sound of the elevator, the warmth of his jacket around her shoulders, the quiet hum of the city below his penthouse windows. No names, no promises, just silence and skin, the way strangers try to erase themselves through each other. When dawn came, Ruby woke alone. The bed was cold on his side. A single gray silk tie lay across the pillow beside a note written in neat, deliberate handwriting. "Thank you for reminding me I can still feel." Ah. She held the note for a long time, then folded it into her palm. For once, she didn't cry. Maybe it was freedom. Maybe it was just tequila. Either way, she knew it was over, whatever it had been. Rain had stopped, but the city still smelled of it, metallic and alive. Ruby adjusted her blazer in the mirror of the 40th floor lobby of Whitlock Corporation, the media empire she'd built her career around. She'd worked here 5 years, invisible, competent, unshakable. Work was safer than love. Work didn't leave. The elevator chimed. She stepped out into the conference room, surrounded by her team, coffee cups. and nervous chatter. The HR director clapped her hands. "Everyone, please settle down. We're introducing your new CEO today, the man who will lead the next chapter of Whitlock Media." Ruby didn't look up. Her pen tapped rhythmically against her notebook, anything to quiet the dull ache in her temples. "Please welcome Mr. Adam Whitlock." Her pen stopped. The door opened, and in walked the man from the velvet room. Same calm stride, same gray eyes, same impossible stillness. Only now, he was in a tailored charcoal suit that fit him like authority itself. Ruby's breath caught. For a moment, the world blurred again, not from rain this time, but disbelief. He looked across the room, gaze sweeping over every face until it landed on hers. A flicker, just a second of recognition, or maybe imagination. Then it was gone. "Good morning," he said smoothly. "Let's make something extraordinary together." Applause erupted. Ruby's hands stayed still on her lap. Her pulse roared in her ears. When the meeting ended, she tried to slip out quietly, but his voice stopped her. "Ms. Johnson." She froze. "You handled the campaign accounts for the West Coast branch, correct?" "Yes, sir." "I'll be reviewing them personally. Have the files on my desk by tomorrow morning." "Of course," she managed to say, though her throat felt tight. Adam nodded once, polite, distant, then turned away. But as she walked out, she could feel his gaze on her back, heavy, searching, uncertain. In the reflection of the glass wall, their eyes met again. And for an instant brief, electric, it wasn't CEO and employee. It was man and woman, memory and denial, fire and restraint. That night, Ruby sat in her apartment overlooking the city. The note he'd left 5 days ago still lay folded on her desk. She opened it again, tracing the signature with her fingertip. A. Now it had a full name. Adam Whitlock. The billionaire son of a media dynasty. The man the press called the ghost heir for how he disappeared from the spotlight 3 years ago after the death of his fiancée. Ruby closed her eyes. Of course, that's why his eyes looked like that, as if he'd already buried too much. She told herself it didn't matter, that it was just one night, that he probably didn't even remember her face. But when her phone buzzed with an internal company memo, executive review scheduled 9:00 a.m. CEO and project manager Johnson, her stomach dropped. He'd requested her specifically. Ruby stood by the window. The city lights reflected in the glass like falling stars. She could still feel the ghost of his hand on her skin, the warmth that had made her forget the cold. For 7 years, she'd been careful, composed, untouchable. Now, one man one night had cracked something open she didn't know how to close. Outside, lightning split the clouds, silvering the skyline. Ruby whispered to no one, "I'm not doing this again." But even she didn't believe herself. In another corner of the city, Adam sat alone in his penthouse, staring at the same gray tie coiled beside an untouched glass of scotch. His assistant had left hours ago. The skyline stretched before him like an empire made of glass, fragile, brilliant, empty. He turned the tie over in his hand. Her perfume still lingered faintly on the silk citrus and warmth and rain. He'd had countless women. But that night, something in her eyes, the way she kissed him, like she was saying goodbye to the world, had followed him into every waking hour since. He hadn't planned on coming back to New York, hadn't planned on taking over Whitlock Corporation again. But when he saw her name in the employee directory, a part of him that had been silent for years whispered, maybe this is why. He poured the drink, but didn't taste it. "Ruby Johnson," he murmured into the empty room, as thunder rolled over Manhattan. "You have no idea what you've started. Tomorrow's meeting will shatter the fragile line between the professional and the personal. She'll fight to forget. He'll fight not to remember until both lose. Because some storms don't end when the rain stops." The air inside the conference room felt heavier than oxygen, thick with ambition, expectation, and the faint hum of anxiety. Ruby sat near the end of the long glass table, spine straight, pulse drumming against the hollow of her throat. She had spent 5 years mastering the art of invisibility. Today, that skill betrayed her. When the doors opened, he entered with the quiet confidence of a man who had never been told no. The light from the hallway framed his silhouette before settling on the sharp cut of his jaw, the immaculate gray suit, the eyes she knew too well, eyes she had traced in the dark once, under a rain that seemed endless. He walked past each row with precise steps, acknowledging people with polite nods. When his gaze reached her, Ruby's breath faltered. Nothing. No flicker of recognition. No pause. Just a nod, brief and impersonal. "Good morning," he began. "I'm Adam Whitlock, your new CEO." His voice carried easily through the room, smooth, deep, resonant. It was the same voice that had whispered into her neck, once now polished. Professional. Untouchable. Ruby's fingers tightened around her pen. It might have snapped if the meeting lasted a minute longer. He spoke about restructuring, innovation, global vision, words that rolled off his tongue like strategy rather than conviction. Ruby watched him through the haze of fluorescent lights, wondering which part of him was real, the man who had kissed her like the world was ending, or this executive god who could make empires rise and fall with a nod. The meeting ended. People shuffled out in a rush of murmured compliments and clinking coffee cups. Ruby packed her files quickly, eager to disappear. She was 2 steps from the door when she heard it. "Ms. Johnson." Her name in his mouth sounded different, deliberate. She turned. "Yes, sir." He didn't answer right away. Instead, he leaned back in the chair at the head of the table, fingers steepled, studying her. The city stretched behind him through the window, rain streaking the glass in long silver trails. "I've reviewed your department's reports," he said finally. "You handled the charity initiative last quarter." "Yes. I want to see the proposal myself. Bring it to my office tomorrow morning." Ruby nodded, forcing her voice steady. "Of course. Mr. Whitlock." He tilted his head slightly, gaze narrowing, thoughtful, searching. "Strange," he murmured. "I feel like we've met before." The sentence landed like a spark in dry grass. Ruby swallowed. "You must meet many people, sir. I doubt I'd be memorable." Her tone was cool, measured, but inside, her chest was chaos. She could smell his cologne, sandalwood, and mint, the same scent that had lingered on her pillow days ago. Memory pressed against her ribs until breathing hurt. He smiled faintly, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Memorable isn't the word I'd use," he said softly, as if to himself. Then, louder. "That will be all, Ms. Johnson." Ruby turned, keeping her steps even as she left the room. Behind her, Adam watched the door close, his reflection caught in the window's rain-slick glass. For a second, he could almost see the ghost of a woman in red looking back. Ruby couldn't sleep. She sat on her couch, city lights spilling across her living room floor like scattered gold. Her laptop screen glowed with half-finished slides, numbers, graphs, meaningless words that blurred together. Every time she blinked, she saw his face, the way he'd looked at her without knowing her, or pretending not to. "You're fine," she told herself. "You're just another employee, just another face in a sea of names." But her hands trembled when she reached for the tie in the drawer, the gray silk one she hadn't been able to throw away. She pressed it to her lips for one reckless second before dropping it as though it burned. Adam sat in his penthouse office, long after the building had emptied. The city was a maze of light and rain below him. He loosened his tie, eyes lingering on the file that bore her name, Ruby Johnson, Media Relations. He didn't know why it had caught his attention. Maybe it was the way she spoke, controlled, but not cold, professional, but not detached. Or maybe it was something older, buried deep, whispering through the cracks of memory. He closed his eyes. For a heartbeat, he saw rain again. Red silk. Tequila. A pair of trembling hands. Then nothing. He opened his eyes and laughed quietly to himself. "You're losing it," he muttered. "She's just another employee." But even as he said it, he knew it wasn't true. Ruby arrived early. Too early. Her reflection in the elevator mirror looked like someone rehearsing composure-perfect hair, neutral lipstick, eyes that betrayed nothing. But under her blazer, her pulse refused to calm. When she entered his office, Adam was standing by the window, talking into a headset. The skyline stretched behind him vast, indifferent. He gestured for her to wait without looking at her, his attention still on the call. "Postpone Tokyo until next quarter," he said sharply. "No, I don't care what the board thinks. Do it." He ended the call, finally turning toward her. "Ms. Johnson," he greeted, punctual. "I like that." Ruby set the folder on his desk. "The proposal you requested." He took it but didn't open it. Instead, he studied her face openly this time. The silence stretched, heavy, until Ruby spoke again. Voice lower now. "Was there anything else, sir?" His gaze didn't waver. "You're nervous." "No more than anyone would be when standing in front of their CEO." "That's not what I meant." He stepped closer, not enough to breach distance, but enough for her to smell the faint scent of rain still clinging to his suit. "You remind me of someone," he said finally. "That seems to happen a lot," she replied, a ghost of a smile on her lips. Must be a trick of memory. Adam's mouth curved slightly, almost amused, almost wounded. "Or maybe it's something else," he murmured. Ruby met his gaze, then truly met it, and for a heartbeat, the room disappeared. It was only the two of them, standing on the edge of something neither could name. Then she stepped back. "If there's nothing else, I should return to my team." "Go ahead," he said quietly. "But Ms. Johnson." She paused. "I don't believe in coincidences." Ruby turned without replying, her heels soft against the marble floor. But the tremor in her hands betrayed her. Rain again, gentler this time, tapping against her office window. Ruby sat alone. Lights dimmed, scrolling through old photos on her phone. There were none of him. Of course, just cityscapes, random dinners, snapshots of people she barely saw anymore. But she wondered, if she had taken one picture that night, would things feel more real or more impossible? Her email pinged. From A. Whitlock. Subject: charity proposal revision. "You've done impressive work. Let's discuss tomorrow. 7:00 a.m. My office. Bring coffee black. No sugar." Ruby stared at the screen. No CEO scheduled meetings at 7:00 a.m. for a proposal that could wait. This wasn't business. It was a test. Adam watched from his own office across the darkened floor. Through the glass, he could see her silhouette in the faint glow of her monitor. The rain distorted the view, turning her into a blur of light and movement. He wanted to walk across the hall, to ask the question that had haunted him for days. "Who are you to me?" But he didn't move. He couldn't. He had buried too many ghosts to start chasing another. When Ruby finally left, the city had gone quiet. She stepped into the empty street, rain pooling around her heels, air heavy with unsaid things. She looked up at the tower where his office lights still burned and whispered under her breath, "You remember me. You just don't want to." The wind carried her words upward, lost among the lights. Inside, Adam stood by the window, watching her disappear into the rain. His reflection stared back a stranger in a glass cage. And for the first time in years, he wasn't sure which version of himself was real. The next meeting will blur the lines between control and confession. A hidden engagement contract will surface. One secret will cost them both everything. Because the past never really forgets. It just waits for the rain to fall again. By the third day, under Adam Whitlock's command, Ruby Johnson understood what it meant to walk on the edge of a blade. He never raised his voice. He didn't have to. His authority moved through emails sent 1 minute before deadlines, surprise meetings that erased lunch breaks, and glances sharp enough to pin her in place. "You're always this calm, Miss Johnson." "I just do my job, sir." "Is that what you call it? You hide panic better than most." He said it without cruelty, yet the words slid under her skin like ice. Ruby smiled tightly, because that was what professionalism demanded. Inside, she burned. She couldn't tell if he was punishing her for leaving his bed before sunrise, or if he simply hated anything he couldn't control. Either way, she refused to let him see her bleed. The office lights dimmed to half power, turning the city outside into a sheet of silver rain. Ruby stayed late, sorting files for the Manhattan Blue Project. One envelope at the bottom bore the stamp, "Private A, Whitlock only." She hesitated. The professional part of her said no. The human part, the one still haunted by his touch, whispered, "Just one look." The paper crackled as she opened it. 2 signatures stared back. One was his. The other belonged to Charlotte Graham, heiress to Graham & Co., the investment firm threatening to pull its funding from Whitlock Group. Across the top, in clean serif font, "Marriage contract. Effective date 2 weeks from now." Ruby sat frozen, the hum of the city slipping into silence. She didn't feel jealousy, not the sharp, possessive kind. What she felt was emptiness, that hollow ache when you realize the moment you thought was real had always been temporary. She closed the folder, heart pounding in her throat. The world of men like Adam Whitlock had no room for mistakes or for women like her. When he entered, she was already waiting, file in hand. Her posture was perfect, her expression unreadable. "The documents you requested, sir." He paused at the doorway. "I told you to call me Adam." Ruby's smile didn't reach her eyes. "I don't say the first name of a man who's about to get engaged." For a second, something flickered behind his calm surprise. Then understanding. Then the kind of anger that hides behind control. "You opened it." "Not intentionally," she replied evenly. "But some things are impossible not to see." The silence between them hummed with unspoken truths. Adam's jaw tightened. "Don't believe everything you read. Not every contract is about money." Ruby's reply came like a breath too soft to fight, yet sharper than a blade. "And not every love is worth the price of keeping." She turned to leave. The click of her heels echoed through the office, precise, defiant. When the door shut, the sound of his fist hitting the desk broke what little calm remained. He stared at the shattered pen rolling across the floor. Her words stayed lodged under his skin. Not every love is worth the price of keeping. If only she knew. The contract with Charlotte Graham wasn't love. It was survival. Graham & Company controlled 40% of Whitlock Media's capital. Without them, the empire his father had built would collapse within months. His board had made the terms clear: merge assets, merge names, merge lives. Adam had agreed, not because he wanted to, but because he'd run out of ways to fight the ghosts of his father's debts. And yet, the moment Ruby looked at him with that quiet disappointment, that impossible mixture of strength and heartbreak, he knew he'd already lost something far more irreplaceable than a company. He poured a glass of whiskey he didn't want and watched the snow begin to fall outside the window. Thin, weightless, doomed to melt like every boundary he'd drawn between duty and desire. She didn't go home after work. Instead, she found herself walking through Bryant Park, the snow collecting on her coat like tiny, indifferent stars. Her breath came out in pale clouds. Her thoughts refused to settle. For years she had built walls around herself, brick by brick, after the heartbreak, after the betrayals, after the realization that love was often just another form of negotiation. And yet, One reckless night had undone all of it. She hated him for making her feel again. She hated herself more for still wanting him despite everything. Passing shop windows blurred with frost, she caught her reflection composed, capable, alone. Maybe that was who she'd always been destined to be. When she reached her apartment, the city was quiet. She opened her laptop, fingers hovering over a resignation letter she couldn't bring herself to write. In her inbox blinked a new message. From A. Whitlock. Subject meeting tomorrow. M. Bring the Manhattan Blue budget file. A. She closed the screen, exhaling shakily. Tomorrow would be war. The snow hadn't stopped. The streets shimmered in white when she arrived. Adam was already there, coat off, sleeves rolled, looking like he hadn't slept. Sit down, he said. She stayed standing. If this is about the project, the numbers are solid. It's not about numbers, Papa. He came closer, each step deliberate. Ruby's pulse raced, but she refused to move. You think you understand what that contract means? I don't need to, she said. It's not my business who you marry. Mr. Whitlock. Stop calling me that. Why isn't that what you want? Boundaries. He laughed once, low and bitter. Boundaries don't work with you. You crossed mine the moment you kissed me. The words hit her like a storm she'd been pretending wasn't coming. That night didn't mean anything. Then why are you shaking? Ruby's breath caught. For a heartbeat. The air between them sizzled electric, dangerous. Then she stepped back, voice steady again. You should focus on saving your company. I'll send the updated file. Ruby. Good day, sir. She left before he could answer. He watched her walk away through the glass walls, her figure fading into the falling snow. He wanted to chase her, to explain that the engagement wasn't real, that he was trapped by boardrooms and signatures, not by affection. But explanation felt like a coward's excuse. He was a man built from control of image, of empire, of everything except the one thing that now mattered. Ruby Johnson had turned his perfect world into a question he didn't know how to answer. In her apartment, Ruby sat by the window, the city below cloaked in white silence. She held the gray tie again, fingers tracing its texture as if it could still bridge the distance between them. Her phone vibrated an unknown number. A message flashed on the screen. Meet me. 1 hour. Pier 17. No signature, but she knew. She stared at the message until the screen dimmed. The snow outside thickened, blurring the line between sky and earth, between what was right and what she wanted. Finally, she stood, slipping into her coat. At the pier, one confession will rewrite every truth. A promise will be made and broken. A secret heartbeat will begin to grow inside her. Because sometimes, love doesn't end with a goodbye. It begins with one. The rain had returned, not the soft kind that whispered across glass, but the February kind that cut through skin like shards of ice. New York blurred behind a curtain of water, and Ruby stood beneath the awning of the Whitlock Tower, her resignation letter still damp from the rain. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. 5 years of loyalty, erased by a signature on a marriage contract that wasn't hers. She had packed her things, the small plant by her desk, the silver pen he once handed her, the silence she had learned to wear like armor, and walked out. She wasn't going to be the woman who waited in shadows while someone else wore the spotlight of his last name. As she stepped onto the sidewalk, headlights flashed across the rain-slick street. A black Bentley slid to a stop beside her. The door opened. Adam stepped out. No umbrella, no coat, just the storm, clinging to him like a punishment he'd chosen to bear. Rain soaked through his white shirt, turning it translucent against the hard lines of his body. His hair, normally immaculate, clung to his forehead. But his eyes, those sharp gray eyes, burned with something wild, something close to fear. "Why did you leave?" he demanded. Ruby's fingers tightened around the strap of her bag. Because I refuse to be a footnote in your biography. Sir, don't call me that. His voice cracked rough, frayed, as if he'd been shouting at himself for hours. Ruby, I called off the engagement. For a second, the city seemed to stop breathing. Rain hammered around them, 1,000 tiny knives on asphalt. Ruby blinked, unsure she'd heard him right. You what? He stepped closer, his breath visible in the cold. I ended it. It's over. She let out a laugh, soft, disbelieving, a sound that was more sorrow than mirth. Don't do this because of me, Adam. It's not because of you. His words came fast, desperate. It's because of me. You... He swallowed hard, eyes searching hers. You make me want to be real, even if it ruins everything else. For a moment, neither spoke. The city roared around them, taxis honking, thunder splitting the clouds, but it was just the two of them, standing in the middle of a street that had seen too many goodbyes. He reached for her hand. That touch familiar. Electric sent a jolt straight through her chest. It was the same warmth that had undone her in that bar weeks ago. The same safety she'd sworn never to need. Stay, he said quietly. Please, let me prove. Stop. Ruby cut him off, her voice trembling but her gaze steady. There are things you can't fix. Adam. He frowned, confusion and hurt flashing in his eyes. Then tell me what to do. Tell me what I'm fighting. Ruby shook her head slowly. Rain streamed down her cheeks, mingling with tears she refused to shed. I have something to protect now, she said. Something you can't save. She pulled her hand from his, the separation like a wound tearing open. Adam reached out instinctively, but stopped himself. The distance between them was only a few feet, yet it felt infinite. He tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. And when Ruby turned and began to walk away, her red scarf trailing like a line of fire against the gray, he realized for the first time that not everything could be negotiated, not every loss repaired. He stood there until her silhouette dissolved into the rain. The wind swallowed her name before he could say it. Ruby sat on the edge of her bed in her small Brooklyn apartment, still wearing the same rain-soaked clothes. The city outside her window pulsed faintly, taxis, sirens, laughter. All the things that didn't stop just because one life quietly cracked apart. She took a deep breath and looked down at the small white stick on her nightstand. 2 red lines. For a long moment, she couldn't move. The sound of the rain outside softened, as if the world itself was holding its breath. She pressed a trembling hand to her abdomen, her heartbeat echoing in the stillness. Oh. Tears slid silently down her cheeks, not from regret, but from the terrifying tenderness of realization. Oh, God, she whispered. You're real. She laughed, a small broken sound that turned into a sob. All the walls she'd built, the decisions she'd justified, they all collapsed under the weight of 2 crimson lines. Love, she thought, had always been a storm. Now it had left her with lightning in her veins and a fragile life in her womb. I'm sorry, she whispered into the quiet. I can't let you grow up in his world, a world of contracts, cameras, and broken promises. She closed her eyes and leaned her forehead against her knees. The rain outside grew louder, as if echoing her resolve. She would protect her child, even if it meant walking away from the only man who had ever seen her, truly seen her, for a heartbeat of time. He didn't sleep. He sat in the driver's seat of the Bentley, rain hammering against the windshield like a relentless metronome. Her voice, her refusal replayed in his head, word for word. I have something to protect, Adam, something you can't save. He didn't understand, not yet. But something inside him twisted an ache deep and unfamiliar, like instinct whispering danger. He'd broken every rule that had defined him, defied the board, risked the empire, walked away from a merger that could have saved everything. And yet, none of it mattered. He hadn't saved the one thing he truly wanted. He leaned back against the seat, closing his eyes. The scent of rain and her perfume still lingered faintly on his hands. "You can't save what doesn't want to be saved," he muttered. But the words tasted wrong. He didn't believe them. Not really. Outside, the rain began to fade. A pale light crept over the city dawn, gray and fragile. He looked at his reflection in the mirror and barely recognized the man staring back. For the first time in his life, Adam Whitlock looked human. Morning arrived, pale and uncertain. Ruby wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and stood by the window, watching snow mix with the last traces of rain. She should have felt relief, but all she felt was a quiet ache. Her phone buzzed. A new message. Unknown number. "I don't know what I did to lose you, but I meant every word. I canceled it. For good. A." She read it twice, then pressed delete. Some things, she thought, are too fragile to answer. Some goodbyes need silence to survive. She looked down again at her stomach. Flat for now, but no longer empty. A small smile broke through the sadness. You and me," she whispered. "That's enough." The city below began to stir, the sound of life, of people chasing things that slipped through their fingers. Ruby turned away from the window and began to pack. A new apartment, a new start, a new promise. Outside, winter sunlight broke through the clouds, glinting off the wet pavement. The storm had passed, but the air still smelled of rain, that strange scent of endings that might also be beginnings. In his office, the world was already moving on. Press releases, board meetings, phone calls, everyone wanted answers about the canceled engagement. Adam gave none. He sat by the window, staring at the empty chair across from his desk, the one where Ruby used to sit, typing quietly, never looking at him longer than she had to. He wondered if she'd ever come back. He wondered if she knew that when he said, "I canceled it for me," what he really meant was for us. He picked up his phone, dialed her number, stopped, deleted it instead. For the first time, Adam Whitlock, the man who could buy, build, or bury anything, realized there were things in life he couldn't own. Only hope, only loss, only love. Months will pass. A chance encounter in another city will reveal what the rain once hid. And when Adam sees Ruby again, not alone this time, he'll finally understand what she meant by something to protect. Because destiny has a way of finding those who try hardest to escape it. 3 months later, spring came late to Chicago. The city wore its cold like an unfinished sentence, soft fog, curling through the streets, hiding what the world wasn't ready to face. Ruby Johnson blended in easily. No one here knew who she'd been, not the sharp, poised executive from New York, not the woman who once loved a man powerful enough to ruin her. At 20 weeks pregnant, she had learned to live quietly. She rented a 1-bedroom apartment above a bakery, worked part-time for a small design firm, and carried her secret beneath loose sweaters and steady smiles. Each morning before work, she'd rest her palm on her belly and whisper, "We're okay, sweetheart. Mama's okay. You're okay too." It became a ritual, a small prayer to a God she wasn't sure she believed in. But somehow, saying it aloud made breathing easier. Fog rolled over the city like spilled smoke. Ruby stayed late at the office, finishing a project that no longer mattered, then rushed for the last bus. The streets were slick with mist. Streetlights blurred into golden halos. Her steps echoed softly until the world fractured into noise. A blinding flash. Headlights too close. A scream hers, or someone else's before everything dissolved into silence. Then nothing. Adam Whitlock's flight landed just past midnight. He hadn't packed. He hadn't thought. He'd simply run. His friend, Dr. Bennett, had called from Chicago an hour earlier, breathless, urgent. "It's Ruby." There was an accident. She's alive. Barely. You need to come. And now, he was here in a sterile corridor that smelled of antiseptic and despair. The walls seemed to close in around him as Bennett spoke softly. She suffered a concussion. Some memory loss is possible. But the baby, he hesitated. The baby's heartbeat is strong. She's still fighting. Adam's knees nearly buckled. He pressed a trembling hand against the wall, exhaling as if he'd been holding his breath for months. Thank God, he whispered. Thank God you didn't take everything. When he finally entered the room, time stopped. Ruby lay motionless, her face pale under the fluorescent light. Her hair, dark and tangled against the pillow, framed her like a fallen angel. Her hand rested instinctively on her belly, even in sleep, as though she'd been guarding something far more precious than herself. Adam moved closer, each step breaking him a little more. He reached out, brushing his fingers against a strand of her hair. Ruby. His voice cracked. You don't have to forgive me. Just wake up. Please. Let me make this right for you. For our child. He sat there until the first light of dawn crept across the hospital floor, a thin, fragile band of gold. The morning sunlight filtered through blinds, striping the room in muted warmth. Machines beeped softly beside her bed. Then, a sound small, fragile, but real. Ruby's breath hitched. Her eyelashes fluttered. When her eyes opened, confusion filled them first, then fear. She turned toward the sound of someone standing near the window. Adam froze mid-step. For a moment, hope and disbelief collided in his chest. Ruby. She blinked, studying him as if seeing him for the first time. Who are you? The words fell like glass, shattering on marble. Adam stood still, every muscle locking in place. The air between them turned sharp. He tried to speak, but his throat refused. Finally, he managed. I'm someone who owes you everything. She frowned slightly, eyes distant. I don't understand. Her gaze flickered to the IV line, the bandage on her wrist, the swollen curve beneath the hospital sheet. She placed a tentative hand over her stomach, and instinct softened her expression. The baby, she whispered. Is it safe? Adam said quickly, voice barely steady. You both are. She exhaled a shaky, relieved sound. But when she looked back at him, there was only polite bewilderment. You know me? She asked quietly. He smiled, or tried to. Better than I know myself. Her brow furrowed, uneasy. Then why can't I remember you? Adam turned away, blinking hard against the sting behind his eyes. Through the window, the afternoon light fractured into shards on the glass blinding. Beautiful. Cruel. He stayed. Day after day. He brought her flowers, daisies, because she once told him roses were too sure of themselves. He told her stories about the city, about meaningless things, anything that might bring color back into her face. But he never told her the truth. He didn't tell her about the tequila rain, the kiss that started everything, or the child she carried that had once been conceived in defiance of logic and fate. He wanted to. God, he wanted to. But every time he saw her blank gaze, every time she smiled with polite distance, he knew this wasn't about him anymore. This was about giving her peace, even if it meant losing her again. One evening, as the nurse dimmed the lights, Ruby looked at him and said, You come here every day. You don't have to. Maybe not, Adam replied softly. But I want to. She studied him for a long time, as if trying to locate a memory just out of reach. I don't know who you are, she murmured. But when you're here, I feel safe. The words nearly undid him. After she fell asleep, Adam sat in the dark, the hum of machines filling the silence. He reached for her hand, careful not to wake her. If this is the only way I get to love you, he whispered, then so be it. In dreams. She saw flashes, a bar filled with light, rain on glass, a man's hand against her cheek, a voice whispering, "Stay." But when she woke, the images dissolved like mist. Sometimes, she'd catch herself humming a tune she didn't know, or feeling her chest tighten when the stranger by her bed smiled that quiet, broken smile. She didn't understand why she trusted him, only that she did. Weeks passed. Ruby healed. Her laughter returned, soft and uncertain at first, then brighter. But she still didn't remember. And Adam, who had built his life on control, learned the hardest truth of all. You can't make someone love you again. You can only stay close enough to be there if they do. He started leaving earlier each evening, lingering in the hallway long after her door closed. One night, as he turned to leave, Dr. Bennett stopped him. "She's making progress," the doctor said. "Memory can be unpredictable. It may come back suddenly. And if it doesn't, then maybe she's meant to start over." Adam looked through the small window in the door. Ruby was laughing softly with a nurse, her hand resting protectively over her belly. The sight both healed and destroyed him. "She already has," he said quietly. "I just don't know if there's a place for me in that new beginning." The sky blushed with the first hints of dusk, soft pink melting into gold. Light spilled through the blinds, brushing over Ruby's face. It illuminated her like something holy, as if the universe itself was reminding him that even forgotten love still glowed, somewhere deep beneath the surface. Adam stood at the doorway a moment longer, memorizing her. Then he turned away. Memory is a fragile thing, but fate remembers what we forget. In the months to come, Ruby will start over in a world without him, until their child's heartbeat brings his name back to her lips. Because love, no matter how deeply buried, always finds its way back to the light. Chicago, 5 springs since the day she opened her eyes and forgot the world. Morning began with laughter. 2 children's voices, bright, quick, full of life, tumbled down the hallway of a small apartment overlooking the city park. Ruby Johnson stirred awake, sunlight spilling across her sheets. Her curls shimmered in the pale light as she smiled toward the source of the chaos, a boy and a girl. 5 years old, wrestling over a crayon. "Mommy," Miss Clara said, "we need to bring a family picture today." "Then we'll take a new one," Ruby said, laughing softly as she smoothed her daughter's hair. Ava, the gentler twin, beamed, her dimples deep and sure. Aiden grinned from the floor, his gray eyes sharp and curious, the same color as the sky before a storm. Ruby often wondered where that shade came from. Then she'd remind herself not all answers were meant to be found. Above her desk hung a painting she'd done years ago, 2 hands clasping in the middle of a storm. She never remembered why she painted it, but every time she looked at it, her chest ached, not from sadness, but from a strange warmth she couldn't name. "Come on," she said. "Let's take that picture before you get syrup on your shirts." Ava giggled. "Can we make silly faces?" "Only if we promise to love them later," Ruby teased, lifting her phone. The camera flashed, freezing a moment of sunlight, of small miracles she still couldn't believe she deserved. Ruby had built a new life out of quiet purpose. After recovering, she'd started working at a women's community design center, teaching others how to rebuild, how to dream again. She'd learned that helping others stand was the only way to stop herself from falling. No one there knew her past. They knew only Ruby Johnson, the warm, steady woman who never missed a Monday and who always carried an extra lunch for whoever forgot theirs. But sometimes, late at night, when the kids were asleep, she'd stare at the ceiling and feel a pulse of something missing. Not a face, not a name, but a feeling like a note of music she could almost hear, but never catch. The Lighthouse Project, A Light for the Left Behind, was the center's newest initiative, and Ruby was leading the presentation. It was a safe haven designed for women rebuilding their lives after loss. At 3 p.m., The director gathered everyone in the conference room. "We have wonderful news," she said, smiling. "A corporate foundation from New York has decided to fund our project." Applause filled the room. Ruby clapped too, until she heard the next sentence. "The donor is Whitlock Foundation." Her breath caught. Whitlock. The name brushed across her mind like a ghost she couldn't see familiar. Haunting. Incomplete. "That's a lovely name," she said quietly. The others nodded. They're known for supporting community programs nationwide. Apparently, their chairman insisted on choosing us personally. Ruby smiled, not knowing why her hands had begun to tremble. The center glowed with white flowers and soft music. Banners read, "Lighthouse Hope lives here." Ruby stood backstage in a pale blue dress, her curls pinned back. Heart calm, or so she told herself. Ava and Aiden waited in the front row, coloring quietly with crayons. When her name was called, she stepped up to the podium, smiled, and began to speak. 5 years ago, I was given a second chance at life. I didn't remember who I was or where I came from, only that light can always return, even after we lose it. This project is for every woman who's ever had to start over. Applause rose, warm and thunderous. She exhaled proud, steady, safe. Then the host's voice cut through the noise. "And now, please welcome our primary sponsor, Adam Whitlock of the Whitlock Foundation." The room fell silent. Footsteps echoed on the wooden floor, slow, deliberate. Ruby turned, her practiced smile in place, and froze. The man who entered wore a gray suit that fit him like silence, precise, unassuming, dangerous in its composure. His hair was darker now, a touch of silver at the temples, and his expression unreadable. But his eyes, those gray eyes, sharp and searching, she knew them, even if she didn't know why. The air around her thinned. "Mr. Whitlock," she managed, voice steady. "Welcome. And thank you for believing in our work." He stopped a few feet away, his gaze locked on hers. For a heartbeat, neither moved. "You're Ruby Johnson?" he asked, though he already knew. "Yes, sir." She smiled politely, unaware that her name was the one word he'd whispered into the dark for 5 years. "It's an honor," she added, truly. Adam's reply caught in his throat. He'd imagined this moment 1,000 times, how he'd find her, how he'd beg forgiveness. But he hadn't imagined this, the woman before him, calm, distant, radiant, and empty of recognition. He had searched hospitals, adoption centers, every record he could reach. Everyone told him the same thing: Ruby Johnson disappeared. And now, here she was alive, beautiful, unreachable. He forced a faint smile. "The honor's mine." After the ceremony, he lingered. Ruby moved through the crowd, thanking guests, laughing softly. The sound cut through him. It was her laughter, and yet not. Softer, guarded. When she turned to speak to him again, 2 small figures came running from the back of the hall. "Mommy, look what we made." A boy and a girl, about 5, burst forward, clutching a drawing between them. 2 red hearts, joined by a thin red line. The paper fluttered as they collided with her legs, laughing. Ruby knelt to take it. "That's beautiful, sweethearts." She turned only to find Adam standing behind her, frozen. His gaze fell to the children. Aiden's gray eyes stared back at him, mirror clear, undeniable. Ava hid shyly behind her mother's dress, her smile the exact curve of Ruby's. The world tilted. He crouched down slowly, his voice barely audible. "That's quite the drawing. What's your name, young man?" "Aiden," the boy said proudly. "And that's my sister Ava. We made this for Mommy." Adam's throat went dry. "You both did this?" "Uh-huh." Ava giggled. "It's a boat with 2 hearts, 'cause Mommy says love is like a string that never breaks." Ruby smiled at her children, unaware of the storm unraveling inches away. Adam's hand trembled as the paper slipped through his fingers. A gust of wind swept across the open doors, catching it, spinning it once before it landed against his shoe. He bent to pick it up. His eyes found the words scrawled in childish handwriting at the corner. Aiden and Ava Johnson Whitlock. For a moment, Adam couldn't breathe. The air, the light, the crowd, everything collapsed into silence. He looked up, his vision blurring. Ruby was still kneeling, her hand on her daughter's shoulder, smiling at something one of the volunteers said. She had no idea what he'd just read. He pressed the drawing to his chest like something sacred and breaking all at once. 5 years? 5 years believing she was gone. 5 years not knowing that a part of her 2 parts had been alive all along. And she didn't even know him. Later, as the event ended, Ruby found herself standing alone by the stage, feeling oddly restless. Adam approached, hesitation in every step. "It's a wonderful project," he said softly. "Thank you, Mr. Whitlock." "Please," he said, "call me Adam." Something flickered across her face. Confusion, maybe déjà vu. She tilted her head. That name, it feels familiar. Adam's heart clenched. Maybe it's just the kind of name that stays. Ruby smiled politely, turning toward the twins. "Ava, Aiden, it's time to go home." He watched her gather her children, their children, and walk away through the golden light streaming across the hall. She turned once, as if sensing his gaze, and their eyes met. For the first time in years, she felt something, a strange ache deep in her chest, like remembering a dream you're not sure was real. Adam stood frozen, the children's drawing still in his hand. Outside, the wind shifted, gentle but insistent, scattering petals from the white flowers across the floor. 2 of them landed at his feet, bound together by a thin red thread. The red thread has tightened. Ruby will begin to dream again, flashes of rain, of hands, of love once lost. And Adam, torn between truth and mercy, must decide. Will he remind her of everything, or let her keep the peace she's built? Because some memories, once found, can't be forgotten twice. Since the signing day, Adam had found every possible reason to visit the Lighthouse Center. He told himself it was about the project funding, logistics, progress updates, but deep down, he knew better. He came for her. Each time he entered, the twins Ava and Aiden would run to him with unguarded laughter, wrapping their tiny arms around his legs. They told him stories about school, showed him drawings, argued over crayons. Every hug left him breathless, aching with the truth he could not speak. Ava had Ruby's warmth. Aiden had his eyes. And Ruby, she thanked him politely every time, unaware that the man she shook hands with was the father of her children, the man she had once loved enough to defy the world for. "You don't have to come so often, Mr. Whitlock," she said one afternoon, closing a folder on her desk. "I come for the project," he replied with a faint smile. "Not just for you." "Of course," she said lightly. But her eyes flickered something in his tone, too gentle to be entirely professional. Adam returned her smile, but his eyes betrayed him. They always did. One rainy evening, Ruby stayed late in the art room. The twins were home with the babysitter. Outside, thunder rolled faintly across Lake Michigan. She sat by the window, pencil in hand, sketching without thinking. Her hand moved faster than her mind. Strong lines, a jaw she had seen before, eyes that carried the calm before a storm. When she finished, she stared at the drawing, heart racing. "Why this face?" she whispered. "Why do I keep drawing him?" Her fingers traced the page, trembling. She didn't know his name, but the image felt carved into her soul. Then the door creaked. Adam stepped in, holding 2 paper cups of coffee. Still working. Ruby startled, sliding the sketch aside. Yes, just clearing my head." He caught sight of the corner of the page. May I? Before she could protest, he picked it up. Silence filled the room. It's beautiful, he said softly. You know that, right? Just something my mind made up. He met her gaze. No. Ruby, that's me. She froze, disbelief washing over her. What are you saying? You drew me, even if you don't remember it. Her pulse quickened. The rain outside began to fall harder, drumming against the windows. That's impossible, she whispered. I don't. But her voice faltered as a sharp pain flashed through her temple. A flicker light, sound, touch, rain pouring down. A man's voice, rough with fear. Don't go, Ruby. She gasped, gripping the edge of the table for balance. I see something, she whispered, eyes wide, but it's blurry. Adam took a hesitant step closer. It's all right. Don't force it. There was a storm, and someone held me. Her breathing trembled. I think it was you. Adam's hand hovered near hers, not daring to touch. Even if you never remember it all, he said, voice breaking. I'm still here. They worked side by side preparing for Lighthouse's first charity art exhibition. Adam helped with the sponsorships. Ruby curated the paintings. Their conversations grew easier, gentler. Sometimes, their hands brushed while sorting frames, and Ruby would freeze, her heart fluttering in confusion. She didn't understand why his presence felt like coming home. At night, she began dreaming again. Flashes of rain, the sound of his laughter. A single moment, a kiss under neon lights and thunder. She woke from those dreams with tears on her cheeks and no words for why. The hall was bathed in gold light and soft music. Guests in elegant suits mingled among rows of paintings, portraits of hope, of rebirth, of light after the storm. Ruby moved gracefully among them, radiant in a silver gown. Her twins watched from the corner, holding tiny bouquets of white daisies. Halfway through the evening, one painting caught her eye. It hadn't been there before. The tag read Anonymous Donor. The title, The Man in the Rain. Ruby stepped closer. The canvas showed a figure standing in a downpour, his face turned toward the viewer, hand outstretched as if reaching for something or someone just beyond the light. The raindrops shimmered like tears. Her breath hitched. Something inside her broke open. The rain, the headlights, the voice whispering her name in the hospital. She took another step forward, trembling. At the bottom corner of the painting, in small, uneven handwriting, were the words, I'm still waiting, under that rain, eh? The room around her blurred. The music faded into a hum. Memories came rushing back, flooding her like a river breaking its dam. The night at the bar, the kiss, the accident, the hospital. His prayer beside her bed. The sound of his voice when she forgot him. Adam, she whispered, barely audible. He turned instantly from across the room. The crowd seemed to vanish between them. You remember, he asked, his voice cracking. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she nodded. All of it. I just don't understand how I ever forgot you. He crossed the space between them in 3 long steps. Ruby didn't move. She couldn't. When his arms wrapped around her, it wasn't dramatic, wasn't desperate. It was quiet, like an exhale 5 years too late. The crowd fell silent. Somewhere, the pianist stopped playing. And in that stillness, the two of them simply breathed. You waited, she whispered against his shoulder. I never stopped, he said. Not for a day. Ruby pulled back just enough to look at him, eyes shining through tears. Then maybe this time, she said softly. We start where the rain ended. He smiled through the blur. You still hate the rain. Not anymore, she whispered. It brought me back to you. When the music started again, the world resumed its rhythm. But Adam and Ruby stayed wrapped in their quiet corner, surrounded by light and forgiveness. Ava and Aiden, seeing their mother smiling through tears, ran toward them. Adam knelt to meet them. For the first time. Ruby didn't stop him. He pulled the twins close, his voice breaking on their names. Aiden, Ava, I'm your father. The children looked up, eyes wide, then grinned as if it had always been true. Aiden whispered, "We knew." Ruby laughed through her tears, and for the first time in years, she felt whole. The past has returned, but healing takes time. As Ruby and Adam try to rebuild the family fate once tore apart, the world outside their small circle will begin to notice. Power, money, scandal, and love tested by the light of truth. Because even when the storm passes, thunder always echoes a while longer. That night, Chicago glittered like a dream. The grand hall of the Lighthouse Center glowed beneath chandeliers and a sea of white flowers. Golden light spilled down the marble columns, soft as autumn sun that had wandered into spring. It was the center's 5th anniversary, a night of hope, healing, and quiet miracles. For Ruby Johnson, it was also proof that life could bloom again after loss. For Adam Whitlock, it was the first night he'd stopped running from redemption. He stood among the crowd, watching her. Ruby stepped onto the stage in a gown the color of dawn pale blue silk that shimmered as she moved. Her curls framed her face softly. Her smile held the calm of a woman who had walked through fire and learned to carry light in her palms. The room fell still. "Thank you," she began, voice low and steady, echoing across the hall, "for believing that no matter how many times you fall, you still deserve to stand and to be loved again." Her eyes found the crowd, and then, unbidden, his. "The light we kindle tonight," she continued, "isn't just for others. It's for ourselves to remind us that we're still here, still capable of shining." Applause erupted. The sound swelled like a wave. Adam clapped too, but quietly. His throat burned. He had lost her once to time, once to memory, and yet here she was, luminous, strong, more herself than ever. He didn't deserve to stand in her light, but he couldn't look away. Later that night, the guests drifted out, the lights dimmed, and the echo of laughter faded down the marble hallways. Ruby slipped outside onto the terrace overlooking Lake Michigan. The moon hung low, rippling on the water's surface like a silver secret. She inhaled the scent of wet grass, closed her eyes, and let the quiet settle. It was her ritual, a small piece, stolen from the noise of the world. "You still sneak away when things get too loud," a familiar voice said behind her. She turned, half startled, half smiling. "And you still find me," she replied softly. "Some habits don't change." "That's one I don't want to break," he said. Adam stepped into the moonlight tall, composed, yet the tremor in his voice betrayed the storm beneath. He handed her a small white envelope. "Don't worry," he murmured. "It's not a business contract." Ruby raised a brow. "That would be a first. I've signed too many of those," he said, looking out at the lake. "Contracts to save the company, to save my name, to save everything but what mattered." His gaze returned to her. "There's only one I ever wanted to sign with you." Ruby opened the envelope. Inside was a single page handwritten, ink slightly smudged. Party A, Adam Whitlock. Party B, Ruby Johnson. Terms: no expiration date. No conditions. No escape clauses. Purpose: for two people who once lost each other to remember that love doesn't need proof. It only needs to exist. Ruby let out a breath that was half laugh, half sob. "You're still ridiculous," she whispered, eyes shining. "I know," Adam said, smiling faintly. "But this time, I'm not letting logic sign it. I'm letting my heart do the work." He sank to one knee. No stage, no spotlight, just the whisper of water and wind. He pulled a small velvet box from his coat and opened it. Inside was a simple gold ring, unadorned, except for a tiny engraving on the inside, A and R. The light we found. Ruby Johnson, he said, voice unsteady. Will you sign this contract not with a pen, but with a yes? Ruby covered her mouth with her hand. Tears welled, warm against the cold air. The city lights blurred behind her. Adam, I was afraid, she whispered. I forgot you. I ran from you. I doubted everything, even myself. But through all of it, I think I never stopped loving you. I just didn't remember how. Adam rose, closing the space between them. Then don't remember, he said softly. Just feel it. So this is our new beginning. No, he murmured. This is just where the story finally catches up. He lifted her hand. Sign it. How? With your kiss? She smiled through her tears. Still giving orders. Mr. Whitlock. Only the ones you already want to follow. Ruby leaned forward, and the world seemed to hold its breath. Their lips met, gentle at first, then deeper, surer. It wasn't the fiery desperation of their first kiss in the tequila rain. It was something stronger. Two lives stitching themselves back together, one heartbeat at a time. Inside, through the tall glass windows, two small figures watched from the edge of the hall. Ava tugged on her brother's sleeve. Mom's smiling again. She whispered, Aiden nodded solemnly. Because she found home. They pressed their palms against the glass, twin reflections glowing in the light from inside the perfect witnesses to a love rewritten under the stars. Adam pulled back slightly, brushing away a tear from Ruby's cheek. You still hate public attention, he said softly. Not tonight, she answered. Tonight, the only thing that matters is this. She took the paper, folded it carefully, and slipped it into his breast pocket. Contract signed, she whispered. No takebacks. Adam laughed quietly, that low, warm sound she hadn't realized she'd missed. You just doomed yourself, Ruby Johnson. I've been doomed since the day I met you in that bar, she teased. Then here's to every beautiful mistake that led us here. He kissed her again, and this time, the world didn't stop, it simply bent around them, letting them exist in the fragile grace of now. The hall was empty when they finally stepped back inside. The moonlight filtered through the tall windows, touching everything with silver. Adam paused by the painting, the man in the rain. Ruby stood beside him, tracing the faint signature at the corner. You never stopped waiting, she said. You never stopped coming back, he replied. They stood in silence for a while, just breathing, letting the past settle behind them like dust after a storm. Then Ruby said quietly, You know what's funny? For years I thought light was something we had to chase, but maybe it was always inside us waiting for the right moment. Adam smiled, slipping his fingers through hers. Then let's never forget again. True love isn't magic. It's courage, the strength to forgive, to trust again, to start over. Sometimes you have to lose yourself just to find the person who'll bring you home. If this story touched your heart, remember, even a broken heart can beat again when it finally learns to love without fear.